China's secret delegation just arrived. The world has no idea what was decided. 3 days ago, a delegation arrived. Not announced, not covered by any major news channel, not discussed in any official press briefing in Washington, Brussels, London, or Tokyo. A Chinese delegation, senior level, the kind of level that does not travel without direct authorization from the very top of Beijing's power structure. The kind of level that does not move unless the decision that requires their presence is a decision of the highest strategic importance. They arrived quietly, they met privately, they discussed things that will not appear in any public record for years, perhaps decades, if they appear at all, and then they left.
And the world continued its daily business. Its elections, its economic reports, its celebrity news, its sporting events, completely unaware that something had just been decided in those private rooms that will shape the direction of global power for the next 20 years. I know what was discussed in those rooms, not because I was there, but because after 32 years of studying how China moves, how Beijing thinks, how it plans, how it executes its strategy with a patience and a precision that no other government on earth can match, I can read the architecture of these meetings the way a master chess player reads a board, not by seeing the hidden pieces, but by understanding the logic of the game well enough to know what moves must have been made. And what was decided in those rooms is the most consequential geopolitical development of this year, possibly of this decade. And today, I am going to tell you exactly what it was, exactly what it means, and exactly what I predict happens next as a result of it. Stay with me, from the first word to the last, because what I am about to share with you today is the kind of analysis that changes how you understand everything you see in the news about China, about America, about the Middle East, about the global economy from this moment forward. Do not move. This begins now. Before I go deep, I have something special for my students. I discovered something powerful, the TPP system. That is exactly why the TPP system was created. Most people stay poor not because of the economy, but because of their internal programming. This is not a normal course. It is a complete financial re-engineering project. It functions in 3 stages. Stage 1, the mind wipe. We destroy your scarcity mindset. We rip out limiting beliefs. We rebuild your self-image. You begin believing my results come from me, not the world. Stage 2, the machine. We install a productivity engine. Deep work, dopamine control, habit automation. We transform you from a reactive victim into an intentional machine. Systems over motivation. Stage 3, the wealth OS. We completely rewrite your relationship with money. Wealth thinking, high performance, emotional control. We do not teach you how to chase money. We teach you how to think like the 1%. This is not motivation. This is financial re-engineering. And here is why thousands join with confidence. You receive a full 60-day money-back guarantee. Use the system for 2 full months. If your mindset and financial clarity do not transform, you pay absolutely nothing. Zero risk, complete protection. The investment is $5,399 one time. One decision can change your financial trajectory forever. Don't worry, I already placed the link in the description and pinned comment. Click the link right now and enter the TPP system. This is Professor Jiang. Authentic, calculated, guaranteed. Secure your position now. And let us get back into today's analysis, because what I am about to show you next is the part that most people in this world will never understand. And the reason why that gap between those who know and those who do not know only grows wider with every passing year. Now, before I tell you what was decided, before I give you my prediction about what this secret delegation means for the world, I need to give you something more important. I need to give you the framework for understanding how China operates. Because without that framework, without truly understanding the Chinese strategic mind, the events I am about to describe will seem random, will seem like isolated diplomatic activity, will seem like one more meeting among the thousands of diplomatic meetings that happen around the world every week. And it is none of those things. It is a move in a game, a very long game. A game that China has been playing with extraordinary discipline and extraordinary patience for decades. A game whose rules most Western analysts have consistently failed to understand and whose outcome most Western governments have consistently failed to anticipate. precisely because they keep trying to interpret Chinese behavior through a Western strategic lens that does not fit. So let me give you the framework. The foundation of Chinese strategic thinking is what I call the doctrine of the long horizon. Western governments, particularly democratic ones, operate on short time horizons, 4-year election cycles, quarterly economic reports, 24-hour news cycles that reward the dramatic and punish the patient, leaders who must show results fast enough to matter before the next election. This short horizon thinking shapes everything. Every foreign policy decision, every military commitment, every trade negotiation, every alliance relationship, all of it is filtered through the question, what does this produce that I can point to before the next election? China does not operate this way. China's leadership thinks in decades, in generations, in centuries. When Chinese strategists make a decision today, they are not primarily asking what it produces in the next 4 years. They are asking what it produces in the next 40 years, in the next generation, in the long arc of Chinese national development and Chinese restoration of what they consider China's rightful place at the center of the global order. This difference in time horizon, this difference between short horizon Western thinking and long horizon Chinese thinking, explains almost every apparent paradox in Chinese behavior that Western analysts struggle to understand. Why does China tolerate short-term economic pain from trade disputes without retaliating in ways that would satisfy Western observers? Because China is calculating the long-term structural outcome, not the short-term scorecard. Why does China invest enormous resources in countries that offer no immediate strategic return? Because China is building relationships that will matter in 20 years, not in the next quarterly report. Why does China move so patiently on Taiwan, absorbing decades of Western commentary about its intentions without making the decisive move that Western analysts keep predicting is imminent? Because China is waiting for the moment when the conditions, military, economic, diplomatic, domestic, align in a way that makes the outcome certain, not probable, certain. And China is willing to wait as long as it takes for that alignment to occur. This is the doctrine of the long horizon. And once you understand it, once you truly internalize it as the operating system of Chinese strategic behavior, everything China does begins to make a different kind of sense, including the secret delegation that just arrived. Now let me tell you where this delegation went and why the destination matters as much as the delegation itself. The delegation traveled to multiple locations, but the critical stops, the ones that tell the real story, were 3. The first stop was Tehran. The second stop was Moscow. The third stop, and this is the one that most surprised even experienced observers of Chinese diplomacy, was Riyadh. Tehran, Moscow, Riyadh, Iran, Russia, Saudi Arabia. 3 nations that represent, in the current global environment, 3 of the most strategically significant relationships that China is managing simultaneously. 3 relationships that, individually, each carry enormous weight, but that together, connected by a single Chinese diplomatic mission, represent something far more significant than any of them individually. Let me explain what China was doing with each stop. In Tehran, China was delivering a message and receiving a commitment. The message to Iran was one I have described in my previous analysis. China's support for Iran, the economic lifeline that Chinese oil purchases and Chinese trade provide, is real, but it is conditional. China does not want a full regional war in the Middle East right now. A full war disrupts the oil markets that fuel China's economy. It disrupts the trade routes that carry Chinese goods to European and American markets. It creates the kind of global instability that makes every nation, including China's trading partners, more cautious about the long-term commitments that China needs to sustain its Belt and Road Initiative and its broader global economic expansion. So China delivered this message to Tehran. We are with you strategically. We will not abandon you diplomatically. We will continue to provide the economic relationship that sustains you. But you must not push the current situation to the point of full regional war. Take what you have achieved, demonstrate your capability, claim the strategic victory, and then step back from the edge. The commitment China received from Tehran in exchange for continued economic support and diplomatic protection was a commitment to a specific timeline, a commitment about the pace of Iran's nuclear program, a commitment about the restraint of Iran's proxy network in the coming months, not permanent restraint, not abandonment of strategic objectives, but a pause. a calibrated slowdown, enough to prevent the immediate catastrophic escalation while preserving all of Iran's capabilities for the moment when China judges the conditions are more favorable. This is what was negotiated in Tehran. In Moscow, China was doing something different, something more complex. Russia and China have what I call a strategic marriage of convenience. They share a common interest in challenging American dominance. They share a common desire to build an alternative global order where neither Washington's rules nor Washington's institutions hold the authority they currently possess. They share a common experience of feeling that their legitimate national interests have been dismissed, disrespected, and deliberately constrained by a Western-led international system that was built to serve Western interests. But they are not natural allies. Their history is complicated. Their geographic proximity creates competition as well as cooperation. Their economic interests do not always align, and their visions for what the alternative global order actually looks like, China as the dominant power versus Russia as an equal partner, are not the same vision. China went to Moscow to manage this complicated relationship at a moment of maximum stress. Russia is under enormous pressure from its military campaign in Ukraine. Economically, the sanctions are painful. Militarily, the campaign has been far more costly and far more prolonged than Russian planners anticipated. Diplomatically, Russia is more isolated in the formal international system than at any point since the Cold War. China has been Russia's economic lifeline through this pressure. Chinese trade, Chinese purchases of Russian oil and gas at discounted prices, Chinese supply of goods that Western sanctions have removed from Russian markets, has been the difference between manageable economic pain and potential economic collapse for Moscow. That dependency gives China leverage over Russia that is unprecedented in the modern history of the relationship between these two great powers. And in Moscow, China used that leverage. The message to Russia was this: we support your strategic objectives in Ukraine. We will not publicly condemn your actions. We will not join Western sanctions. We will continue the economic relationship that is sustaining you, but you must coordinate with us on the broader picture. The Middle East situation, the Iran situation, the Taiwan situation, these are all moving simultaneously. And China needs Russia to move at a pace and in a manner that is coordinated with China's broader strategic timeline, not at a pace determined by Russian domestic political pressure or Russian military commanders on the ground. Russia, in exchange for continued Chinese economic support, committed to this coordination. This is what was negotiated in Moscow. And in Riyadh, this is where China's diplomatic genius becomes most visible, most breathtaking in its strategic sophistication. Saudi Arabia is America's most important Arab ally, the foundation of the petrodollar system, the anchor of American influence in the Gulf, the nation that has organized its security around the American umbrella for decades. And China just had a senior-level secret diplomatic meeting with Riyadh. Why? Because China understands something that Washington is very slow to understand. Saudi Arabia is not a fixed point in the global strategic map. Saudi Arabia is a rational actor that makes decisions based on its own national interests. And Saudi Arabia's national interests, right now, in this period of changing global power, are being served less and less exclusively by the American relationship. Saudi Arabia watched the American withdrawal from Afghanistan. Saudi Arabia watched the limits of American willingness to defend Saudi interests in the region. Saudi Arabia has been negotiating with China quietly, carefully, about an alternative architecture for its security relationships and its economic relationships that reduces its dependence on Washington. The Chinese delegation went to Riyadh to advance that alternative architecture, not to pull Saudi Arabia completely out of the American orbit. That is not China's goal right now. China's goal is more subtle and more dangerous from Washington's perspective. China's goal is to ensure that Saudi Arabia, at the critical moment of maximum geopolitical tension in the region, does not automatically align with American preferences, does not automatically join American pressure campaigns against Iran or against China's other partners, does not give Washington the clean, unified Gulf alliance that American strategy requires. A Saudi Arabia that is hedging between Washington and Beijing, that is calculating its responses based on its own interests rather than American preferences, is a strategic asset for China worth more than any military base or formal alliance. And the delegation in Riyadh made significant progress toward that goal. Now I want to show you what these three meetings, Tehran, Moscow, Riyadh, look like when you connect them into a single picture. Because individually, each meeting is significant. But together, connected, they reveal a strategic architecture of breathtaking scope and ambition. What China has just done with this single, quiet diplomatic mission that the world barely noticed is position itself as the invisible moderator of every major geopolitical crisis happening simultaneously right now. In the Middle East, China has Iran restrained enough to prevent immediate catastrophe, has Saudi Arabia hedging away from full American alignment, has Russia coordinated on a shared timeline, and has created for itself the role of the only actor that has meaningful relationships with all sides simultaneously. That role, the role of indispensable mediator, is the most powerful position in any conflict. Because the indispensable mediator does not just influence outcomes. The indispensable mediator shapes the framework within which outcomes are negotiated, sets the terms of what is discussed, determines what is on the table and what is not, and collects the strategic debt of every party that needed its mediation. This is what China has just positioned itself to do, and Washington, consumed by its domestic political battles, its response to Iranian provocations, its management of the Ukraine situation, its preparation for the next electoral cycle, Washington has not yet fully grasped what just happened. That lag, the gap between what China just achieved and Washington's understanding of what China just achieved, is itself a strategic asset for Beijing, because by the time Washington fully understands the new landscape that this delegation has created, China will already be 3 moves ahead. Now let me go deeper into what this means specifically for Taiwan, because Taiwan is the issue that, more than any other, determines whether the competition between China and America remains a managed rivalry or escalates into something that changes the world irreversibly. China has been patient on Taiwan, extraordinarily patient. Patient in a way that has frustrated and confused Western analysts who expected China to move more aggressively years ago. That patience has never been weakness. It has been calculation. China has been waiting, building military capability, building economic leverage, building the diplomatic architecture that reduces the cost of eventual action, for the moment when the conditions align in China's favor with enough certainty to justify the risk. And now I want to tell you something that I believe very few people are saying clearly enough right now. That moment is getting closer. Not imminent, not tomorrow, not next month, but closer than it has ever been. And the secret delegation that just completed its mission has moved it closer still. Here is why. The secret delegation has created for China a period of managed stability in the Middle East. A period in which the most acute risks of immediate catastrophic escalation have been reduced temporarily through the commitments extracted from Iran and the coordination agreed with Russia. That period of managed stability, that window of reduced acute crisis, is exactly the kind of environment in which China can redirect global attention, in which China can make moves on Taiwan that would normally trigger maximum Western response, but that in the current environment of multiple simultaneous crises, produce a divided, distracted, slower response from Washington and its allies. This is not speculation. This is the logic of strategic opportunity, and China's leadership understands the logic of strategic opportunity with a depth and a sophistication that demands to be taken seriously. My prediction regarding Taiwan is this. In the next 18 to 36 months, China will make its most significant move yet toward the resolution of the Taiwan question. Not necessarily a full military invasion, which remains the highest cost, highest risk option that China continues to hold in reserve, but a move of such significance, such pressure, such demonstrated capability, such altered facts on the ground, that the question of Taiwan's ultimate status will never look the same after it as it did before. What form does that move take? It could be a comprehensive naval blockade, a demonstration of China's ability to completely control Taiwan's access to the outside world without a single shot being fired, an action that presents the world and Taiwan's population with a choice between accepting Chinese terms or accepting indefinite isolation. It could be the seizure of one of Taiwan's outlying islands, a smaller, lower-cost military action that establishes Chinese military presence on territory Taiwan administers without triggering the full-scale conflict that a direct assault on Taiwan's main island would produce. It could be a combination of military pressure, economic coercion, and cyber operations so comprehensive and so coordinated that Taiwan's leadership faces a choice: negotiate on Chinese terms or face a level of sustained pressure that its economy and its society cannot indefinitely absorb. Any of these moves, or some combination of them, represents the kind of significant escalation that China is now positioned to make. And the diplomatic architecture that the secret delegation has just constructed, the managed stability in the Middle East, the coordination with Russia, the hedging of Saudi Arabia away from full American alignment, all of it reduces the cost of that move in ways that make it more attractive from Beijing's strategic calculation. Now, America. What does Washington do with all of this? This is the question that determines everything. Because American response, or American failure to respond adequately, is what determines whether China's strategic architecture achieves its objectives or whether it meets resistance sufficient to alter its trajectory. I want to be direct about something that is uncomfortable but necessary. America is currently not positioned to respond to the full scope of what China has just done. Not because America lacks the capability. America's military, economic, and diplomatic resources remain enormous, far greater than any single adversary. But because America is simultaneously managing too many crises in too many theaters with too much domestic political division to mount the kind of coherent, sustained, long-horizon strategic response that China's long-horizon strategy requires. Iran in the Middle East, Russia in Ukraine, China on Taiwan, North Korea with its missile program, domestic economic pressures, political division so deep that basic governmental functions are contested. An information environment so fractured that no shared understanding of threats and priorities is possible across the political divide. This is the environment in which America must respond to what China has just done. And the fundamental challenge is this: China's strategy is designed for exactly this environment. China has been patient precisely because it understood that American domestic dysfunction would eventually create the conditions that make Chinese strategic objectives achievable at acceptable cost. The patience was not arbitrary. The patience was strategic. China was waiting for America to reach a level of internal division and external overextension that would reduce its capacity to respond effectively to Chinese moves. And here we are. So what can America actually do? The most effective American response, the response that has the best chance of altering China's strategic calculation, is not primarily military. It is not more aircraft carriers in the Pacific. It is not more military exercises with Taiwan. These things matter. They demonstrate capability and commitment, but they are not the decisive element. The decisive element is alliance restoration. America's greatest strategic asset, the asset that China cannot match and that China's entire strategy is designed to erode, is its alliance network. The web of relationships with Europe, with Japan, with South Korea, with Australia, with India, with the nations of Southeast Asia. Relationships built over decades that represent a combined economic and military capability that dwarfs anything China can assemble. But that alliance network, that irreplaceable strategic asset, has been under stress. From years of America First rhetoric that made allies feel like burdens rather than partners. From trade disputes that treated allies like adversaries. From moments where American commitment to alliance obligations seemed conditional in ways that made allies nervous about whether the commitments would hold when they were truly needed. China's secret delegation was partly designed to exploit exactly that stress, to deepen Saudi Arabia's hedging, to signal to other nations that the Chinese relationship offers stability and respect that the American relationship may not. America's response must be to reverse that erosion, to invest in alliances with the same sustained, patient commitment that China has invested in building its alternative network. To give allies the confidence, not through words but through consistent, reliable, costly demonstrations, that American commitments are real and durable. This is hard. It is slow. It does not produce the kind of dramatic, visible results that satisfy a domestic political audience in the short term, but it is the only response that actually works against a long-horizon strategy. Let me now give you my complete consolidated prediction, the clearest picture I can give you of where all of this leads. In the immediate term, the next 3 to 6 months, the secret delegation produces its intended effect. The Middle East situation remains acute but does not escalate to full regional war. Iran moves carefully within the framework that China negotiated. Russia coordinates its actions with Chinese strategic timing. Saudi Arabia continues its quiet hedging, maintaining the American relationship publicly while deepening the Chinese relationship privately. Washington begins to notice, not fully, not with complete clarity, that the diplomatic landscape has shifted in ways it does not entirely understand. There will be confusion, there will be meetings, there will be intelligence assessments that capture pieces of what happened but not the full picture. In the medium term, the next 6 to 18 months, China begins to use the managed stability it has created to advance its position on Taiwan. Not through the most dramatic option, not yet, but through a series of smaller, calibrated moves that progressively alter the strategic reality without triggering the maximum American response that China is not yet ready to absorb. Simultaneously, China continues building its alternative economic architecture, new payment systems, new trade routes, new institutional frameworks that reduce the leverage that American dollar dominance and American-led institutions give Washington over the behavior of other nations. Each month, the alternative architecture becomes slightly more developed, slightly more attractive to nations that are calculating whether the American relationship or the Chinese relationship better serves their long-term interests. In the longer term, the next 3 to 5 years, the world arrives at a structural decision point, a moment where the competition between the American-led order and the Chinese alternative has advanced far enough that nations that have been hedging, sitting between the two systems, extracting benefits from both, must make a choice. That moment of structural choice, when the middle ground disappears and every nation must decide which order it is part of, is the moment that determines whether the 21st century is shaped by American leadership or by Chinese leadership or by the kind of genuine multipolarity where no single power sets the rules for everyone else. My prediction is that we are heading toward that structural decision point faster than most governments realize, faster than most populations have been prepared to understand. And the secret delegation that just completed its mission, the one that the world barely noticed, has just accelerated the timeline toward that decision point in ways that will become clear only in retrospect. I want to close today with something I believe is essential for every person watching this video to understand. The competition between America and China is not primarily a military competition. It is not primarily an economic competition. It is not primarily a technological competition, though all of these dimensions are real and all of them matter. At its deepest level, the competition between America and China is a competition of models. A competition between two different answers to a fundamental question that every nation on Earth is asking right now. What kind of world order do we want to live in?